It's 6:47 on a Thursday evening. I can feel a headache starting. I hit pause on the lecture. This was supposed to be my power hour, my secret weapon. I lean back in my chair and scroll through my phone. You ever have a moment where you see yourself from the outside and you just kind of cringe? That was me, last Friday afternoon. I was in a meeting, a virtual one, just little boxes on a screen. My colleague Ben was presenting his findings from a new data analytics course he'd taken. He was talking about something called regression analysis. I nodded along in my little square, my face arranged into what I hoped looked like thoughtful understanding. I even typed a supportive comment in the chat. Great insights, Ben. Here's the truth. I had no idea what he was talking about. Not a clue. I'd taken a similar course 2 months ago. I'd spent, according to my screen time report, over 24 hours on the platform. I had the certificate saved in a folder on my desktop. But the actual knowledge, it had evaporated. Poof. Gone. All that was left was the certificate, a digital trophy for time served. After the meeting, I just sat there, staring at my own blurred reflection in the dark monitor. The familiar feeling washed over me. Not frustration, exactly. More like shame. A hot, quiet shame. Why couldn't I retain this stuff? Why was Ben able to actually use what he learned? While my brain seemed to be made of Teflon, I started to tell myself the old stories. Maybe I'm just not a data person. Maybe I'm lazy. Maybe I'm just not as smart as everyone else in these meetings. But then I did something different. Instead of opening another tab to find a new course, a better course, I just sat in the quiet. I thought about how I'd studied for those 24 hours. I remembered listening to lectures while cooking dinner, the sizzle of onions drowning out the instructor. I remembered flipping through flashcards on my phone while waiting in line at the post office. I remembered having the video tutorials play in the background while I cleaned my apartment. I had been so focused on logging the hours, on completing the modules, that I never stopped to ask one simple question. Am I actually getting this? That's when I saw the pattern. And honestly, it was a little terrifying. My learning wasn't about learning at all. It was about performance. It was a show I was putting on, mostly for myself. The goal wasn't mastery. The goal was to be able to say, I did it, to check the box, to add another line to my LinkedIn profile, to have the option of talking about it in a meeting, even if I never actually would. I was what I started calling a productivity decoy. I looked like a hard-working duck, gliding smoothly across the pond. But underneath, it was all frantic, desperate, disorganized motion. I was paddling in circles, creating a lot of splash, and going absolutely nowhere. Let me tell you about my friend, Sarah, this big, industry-respected certification. Her Instagram stories were a masterclass in the grind. Pictures of her sleek notebook and colorful pens at 6 a.m., time-lapses of her studying at a cool coffee shop, quotes about perseverance she posted the day she passed the exam, a picture of her with a huge smile, holding the confirmation email. We all cheered for her in the comments. I had coffee with her a month later. I asked her how the new strategies from the certification were working at her job. She got quiet. She stirred her latte for a long time. Honestly, she said, her voice dropping, I haven't used any of it. I crammed for the test. I memorized the formulas. The second I hit submit, it all just left my brain. I paid for the bragging rights, not the brains. She felt like a fraud. She'd traded real understanding for social media likes and a line on her resume. She'd performed the role of learner perfectly, but she'd forgotten to actually learn. That's the villain. It's not laziness. It's not a lack of intelligence. It's this specific, sneaky, false belief. If I'm not suffering visibly, I'm not trying hard enough. We've confused effort with effectiveness. We think the pain is the point, so we choose methods that feel difficult, like forcing ourselves to sit for 4 hours or consuming content at insane speeds, because they come with a built-in badge of honor. We can complain about them. We can show off our battle scars, the empty coffee cups, the late nights. But that suffering is often just a smokescreen. It hides the fact that we're not doing the actually difficult thing, which is the quiet, focused, deeply uncomfortable work of true comprehension. I want you to picture something with me. A beautiful, serene pond. The sun is shining. A pure white duck glides across the surface. It's calm, elegant. It makes no ripples. It looks effortless. Now dip your head below the water. The sound changes. It's murky, chaotic. That same duck's feet are a blur of motion, churning the water, kicking up clouds of dirt. It's working desperately hard just to stay afloat and move in a straight line. That's the trap. We spend all our energy trying to maintain that calm, cool surface appearance. The I've got this persona. That we have no energy left for the purposeful, powerful strokes that would actually propel us forward. We're so busy looking competent that we never build actual competence. But what if? What if we could change the metaphor entirely? What if the goal wasn't to be a better duck, paddling harder in the murk? What if we could build a different kind of boat? One with a quiet engine, a clear rudder, and a map. A boat where you could sit on the deck, feel the sun on your face, and know exactly where you're going, while the machinery below does the efficient, powerful work. The struggle wouldn't be the point anymore. The progress would be. Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right, but getting nowhere? You're reading the books, taking the courses, telling everyone about your new goals. You look like the perfect student, the ultimate self-improver. But deep down, you feel like you're just treading water, exhausted, while pretending to glide smoothly on the surface. You're not alone. I call this the duck trap. On the surface, you look calm and composed, but underneath you're paddling like crazy just to stay afloat. For years, that was me. I was a professional learner. My calendar was packed. My browser had a million tabs open to tutorials, and I was always starting a new course. I was the very picture of ambition, but that little what if started to creep in. What if all this busyness wasn't working? That thought felt dangerous. It meant admitting my strategy was broken, but it was also the first time I felt a glimmer of real hope. The simple, scary idea that maybe I wasn't the problem. My method was. And here's the crazy part. The world is designed to keep us in this trap. A Stanford study found that people who publicly announce their learning goals are up to 40% less likely to actually achieve them. They called it the social reward trap. You get the praise, the likes, the validation just for starting. Your brain gets its little dopamine hit from the performance of learning, and then it loses the motivation to push through the hard, boring middle part, where real skill is actually built. The performance becomes the payoff. So if you see yourself in this, I need you to hear me. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You've just been given the wrong map. You've been trying to win a race by following rules designed to make you look good, not to get you to the finish line. But the truly exciting news is that a new map exists. It doesn't start with more effort. It starts with one simple act. Stop paddling. Just for a moment, and ask yourself the most important question. What if my way isn't working? Because it's not supposed to? That question changes everything. The first step I took felt completely stupid. It was a Sunday night. My Brooklyn apartment was quiet. Usually I'd be frantically scrolling through learning apps, trying to cram a week's worth of growth into an hour before bed. It never worked. Tonight was different. I took out a cheap notebook and a pen. I set a timer for 17 minutes. The task was to answer 3 questions. What did I intend to learn this past week? What did I actually grasp? And what made me avoid the hard part? I stared at that blank page. It felt like it was judging me. My mind immediately rebelled, whispering that this was a waste of time, that I should be watching a tutorial or organizing my to-do list. The resistance was slick and persuasive. It sounded like the voice of productivity. I took a shaky breath and put the pen to the paper. Question 1 was easy. Intention. Learn the basics of SQL for data analysis. That was the plan. Then question 2. Actually grasped. I let the pen hover. I remembered starting the course, the instructor's face, the platform's colors. But what did I actually know? I closed my eyes and tried to summon something. Select from. That was it. That was like knowing the first 3 letters of the alphabet. My hand felt heavy as I wrote. I grasped that SQL exists. I remember the word where is used for filtering. It looked so pathetic on the page. A hot flush of embarrassment crept up my neck. This was it. This was looking at the murky water beneath the surface and admitting how muddy it was. Then came the killer. Question 3. What made me avoid the hard part? My mind lined up all the usual excuses. I was busy, work was crazy, I was tired. But the blank page demanded honesty. The real reasons spilled out. I avoided the practice problems because they looked confusing, and I didn't want to feel stupid. I put on the video lecture but then checked my email, so I only half listened. I ran from the feeling of struggle. That 17-minute session was more productive than months of performative learning. It was ugly, it was cringe-worthy, but it was the truth, and facing that truth was the first step toward a method that actually works. A method that isn't about looking smart, but about getting smart. It's about being honest with yourself, finding the friction, and gently, persistently working through it. That quiet, uncomfortable moment with a pen and paper was the beginning of everything. It's the turn of a new engine, one that runs on honesty, not just effort. If you're tired of paddling and getting nowhere, I invite you to try this. Just 17 minutes. 3 questions. It might feel stupid. It might feel uncomfortable. But it might just be the most important 17 minutes of your week. It's not about adding more to your plate. It's about making sure what's on your plate is actually nourishing you. Thank you for watching. And if this resonated with you, consider subscribing for more on how to learn smarter, not just harder. Have you ever bought a course, a planner, or a book, convinced this was the thing that would change your life, only to find yourself back at square one a few weeks later? I know that feeling all too well. It's like being stuck in a loop, always preparing to start, but never truly moving forward. I want to share a story about how I broke that cycle, and it started with one of the most uncomfortable things I'd ever done. When the timer finally buzzed, I didn't feel transformed. I felt quiet. The frantic noise in my head, that constant feeling of you should be doing something productive, had finally settled down. For the first time, I had a clear, brutal diagnosis of my own problem. The issue wasn't learning CQL. The issue was my deep-seated fear of looking dumb, even in an empty room. I was addicted to the feeling of productivity, not the actual act of learning. I was a master at multitasking my way out of any real challenge. That quiet moment of realization was my first, tiny victory. It wasn't about learning a new skill. It was about learning the truth about myself. It was the first crack in the wall I had built around my own progress. And that's when it hit me. A revelation so simple it was almost embarrassing. I wasn't failing because I was incapable. I was failing because I was systematically and expertly avoiding the point of friction. I was dancing around the edges of everything difficult. Every single time I felt that little tug of confusion, that I don't get this moment, my brain would automatically pivot. I'd click a new tab, check my phone, or tell myself I'd come back to it later. I had perfected the habit of avoidance, not the habit of mastery. That tiny realization was the key. The solution wasn't to work harder. It was to work differently. It was about leaning into the confusion, into the cringe, and just staying there for a minute instead of running away. So you have a choice. You can do what you've always done. Scroll, consume, distract, and promise yourself that tomorrow will be the day. Or you can find a scrap of paper. You can set a timer for 17 minutes. You can ask yourself 3 simple, devastating questions. What was my intention? What did I actually grasp or do? And what did I avoid? And then you can write down the answers that make you want to hide. That embarrassing, beautiful, honest page is your ticket out of the cycle. It's the first real step towards somewhere new. And that destination, it begins with the courage to tell yourself the truth. Armed with just a cheap notebook and a few painful truths, I realized that knowing why you're stuck is only half the battle. The other half is building a new path, one day at a time. This wasn't about some grand overnight transformation. It was about a daily commitment, fought in the quiet minutes of the day, to choose being vulnerably human over being perfectly curated. Try it for yourself. Let me know how it goes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Have you ever felt completely stuck? Like you're running in place, watching endless tutorials, scrolling through articles, but never actually getting better at the things you want to master. I was there, drowning in a sea of information but starving for actual progress. My days were a chaotic mix of good intentions and digital distractions. I'd start with a plan to learn a new skill, but by noon, I'd be lost in a maze of emails, social media, and urgent but unimportant tasks. It felt like I was pedaling a bike with no chain. A lot of effort, zero forward motion. I knew something had to change, but I didn't want another complicated productivity system. I needed something simple, something real. And what I found wasn't a magic bullet, but a set of 4 quiet, powerful secrets that completely rewired how I work and learn. These aren't about hustle culture or working 20-hour days. They're about creating pockets of intense, focused clarity in the middle of everyday chaos. And today, I'm going to share them with you. The first secret, the one that started it all, is the cold start. The rule is simple. For the first 90 minutes of your workday, you cut off all new inputs. Your phone goes on Do Not Disturb and into a drawer. No email, no news feeds, no social media, not even music with lyrics. The only thing you are allowed to do is work on one single thing, based on what you tried to learn or create the day before. You're not consuming, you're creating, using only yesterday's scraps. The first morning I tried this, it was pure agony. It was 7 a.m., my apartment was dark, and the urge to just check my phone was a physical itch. My brain, used to its breakfast of digital candy, felt sluggish and angry. My notebook was open to a note from the day before, avoided the SQL practice problems. Okay, that was my mission. Not to watch a new tutorial, but to open the exact problem that scared me and just stare at it. The silence was deafening. My mind was a total blank. The old me would have instantly opened a new browser tab and searched for a tutorial. But the rule was, no new inputs. I had to wrestle with the blankness using only what was already in my head. I felt frustrated, even stupid. I drew little diagrams. I wrote out what I thought the code should look like, even though it was probably wrong. For 90 minutes, I just wrestled. When my timer went off, I hadn't solved the problem, but I had found something priceless. The exact point of my confusion. I now had a single, sharp question, instead of a vague cloud of fear. And that leads directly to the second secret, the vulnerability sprint. Later that day, on my lunch break, I went onto a professional forum I always lurked on but never posted in. My heart was pounding. I typed out a new post, the subject line, embarrassingly basic SQL question. I explained my confusion in plain, simple language, and ended it with, "Can someone please explain this like I'm 5?" Hitting the submit button felt riskier than any boastful post about completing a course. This was me, showing my messy, unfinished work. I clicked submit, and you know what happened? Within 20 minutes, 3 people replied, not with mockery, but with clear, helpful explanations. One person even made a simple cartoon analogy that made everything click. My dumb question got me more progress in 20 minutes than hours of passive video watching ever had. It taught me a powerful lesson. The world rewards specific curiosity, not vague posturing. The third secret is what I call scheduled neglect. I looked at my calendar and blocked out a 2-hour slot every single afternoon from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. I named the event Admin and React. This became my containment zone. This was the only time I was allowed to do all the shallow, reactive stuff that used to hijack my entire day. Answering non-urgent emails, checking Slack, filling out forms, organizing files. Before, the frantic paddling of small tasks would flood my entire day. Now I was building a levee around my deep, focused work. I let the flood in, but only for a scheduled period. The change was incredible. The rest of my day felt so much calmer. I wasn't ignoring my responsibilities. I was just fencing them in, giving them a specific time and place so they couldn't take over my life. Now, of course, this wasn't a perfect, straight line to success. About 2 weeks in, I had a day where everything went sideways. Work emergencies erupted, my cold start was interrupted, and I felt that old panic rising. The feeling that the system was too fragile for the real world. I ended the day having done none of my planned work. But that night, I did a quick 17-minute review. I wrote, "Setback, work chaos, felt like a failure." But then I added, "What's true? The system isn't for perfect days, it's for the messy ones. Tomorrow, just do the cold start again. Don't try to catch up, just restart." And that became the rhythm. Not perfect consistency, but faithful repetition. I started keeping a simple log. Not what I planned to do, but what I actually did. Octa 12, cold start, wrestled with code, asked a question, felt a clarity. Oct 13, cold start, wrote 300 words, hard. These short, honest entries told a story of small, deliberate steps forward. Finally, the fourth secret, the focus room. I realized I couldn't do this entirely alone. I missed that feeling of being in a library, surrounded by other people who were also focused. So, I started a virtual focus room with 2 friends. 3 days a week, we'd hop on a video call at 9 a.m. No small talk. We would each type our single intention for the session into the chat. Writing project proposal, practicing Spanish verbs, debugging code. Then we'd all mute ourselves and turn our cameras off for 50 minutes of silent, focused work. Just knowing they were there, digitally sitting alongside me, created this powerful sense of shared purpose. We weren't talking about the work, we were just doing it, together in the quiet. Alone, I'd eventually drift off and check the news. With them, I stayed on task. We were building calm, focused surfaces for each other to work on, so there they are. 4 secrets that changed everything for me. The cold start. To begin your day with creation instead of consumption. The vulnerability sprint. To get specific answers by bravely asking dumb questions. Scheduled neglect. To fence in distractions so they don't take over your day. And the focus room, to borrow energy and accountability from others. None of these are revolutionary on their own, but together they create a simple, repeatable rhythm for making real, tangible progress, even on the messiest of days. It's not about finding more time, it's about protecting the time you have for what truly matters. Give one of them a try tomorrow. Just one. And see what happens. Thanks for watching, and if this helped, consider subscribing for more tips on learning and growing. I'll see you in the next one. Have you ever had one of those days where you're just busy? Your to-do list is a mile long, you're hopping between tasks, your keyboard is clacking away, and you feel like a productivity machine. But then at the end of the day, you look back and think, what did I actually accomplish? It feels like you ran a marathon but never left the starting line. If that sounds familiar, you might be trapped in the cycle of performative productivity. I was, and it almost burned me out completely. It started in college. I was that student, the one who was always in the library, surrounded by a fortress of textbooks, highlighters in every color, and an overly ambitious study schedule. I'd post pictures of my color-coded notes, humble brag about my all-nighters. I looked like the model student. The problem was, I was just playing a part. I was so focused on looking productive that I wasn't actually learning. I was memorizing facts just long enough to pass the exam, and then poof, they were gone. I was acing the performance but failing the actual education. This habit followed me straight into the working world. My first corporate job was a breeding ground for this kind of behavior. The culture celebrated being busy. People wore their long hours like a badge of honor, responding to emails at 10 p.m. You're a star. Juggling 5 projects at once. You're a go-getter. So, I played the game. I learned all the tricks. I'd schedule my emails to send early in the morning to make it look like I was an early bird. I'd make sure my calendar was packed with back-to-back meetings, even if half of them could have been an email. I was a master of appearing indispensable. On the surface, it worked. I got promotions, I got praise. My manager would say things like, "You're such a hard worker, always on the go." And I'd feel a rush of validation. But underneath, a different story was unfolding. I was exhausted, I was stressed, and I had this nagging feeling of emptiness. I was climbing the ladder, but the ladder felt like it was leaning against the wrong wall. I was managing projects, but I couldn't tell you the deeper strategy behind them. I knew a little bit about everything, but I wasn't an expert in anything. I was a productivity performer, and the applause was starting to feel hollow. The breaking point came during a huge project launch. For months, I had been the central hub of communication, coordinating everything, sending countless updates and running from meeting to meeting. I was the busiest person on the team. 2 weeks after the successful launch, my director pulled me aside to discuss the project's next phase. He asked me a simple question. What are the top 3 things we learned from this launch that will fundamentally change our approach next time? I froze. I could list what we did, who did it, and when it was done. But the why? The deeper insights? I had nothing. I had been so busy managing the performance of the project that I hadn't taken a single moment to actually learn from it. That was my wake-up call. I realized my entire approach to work and life was broken. I was optimizing for the appearance of effort, not for the outcome of growth and understanding. I had become a human notification system, reacting to every ping and buzz, but never creating anything of lasting value or knowledge. I knew I had to make a change. I couldn't keep living on this treadmill of busy work, so I decided to go on a quest for what I now call deep learning. It's the polar opposite of performative productivity. It's not about how busy you look. It's about how deeply you engage. It's not about multitasking. It's about single-tasking with intense focus. It's not about knowing a little about everything. It's about understanding something from the ground up. My first step was a digital detox of sorts. I turned off almost all my notifications. The constant pings and dings were the lifeblood of my performative busyness, keeping me in a reactive state. Silencing them was like stepping out of a noisy casino into a quiet library. For the first time in years, I could hear my own thoughts. It was uncomfortable at first. The silence made me antsy, but I stuck with it. Next, I completely redesigned my workday. Instead of a fragmented to-do list, I started theming my days. Monday became deep work day. I'd block off a 3 to 4 hour chunk of time in my calendar, labeled Do Not Disturb, Deep Work. During this time, I'd tackle my most complex, high-value task. No emails, no messages, no meetings. Just me and the problem I needed to solve. The first time I did this, it felt revolutionary. In 3 hours of focused work, I accomplished more meaningful progress than I had in the entire previous week of chaotic busyness. I also started to question the culture of meetings. I began declining meetings that didn't have a clear agenda or a specific goal. If I was invited to a meeting just to be in the loop, I'd politely ask for the meeting notes afterward. This freed up huge amounts of time. And guess what? The world didn't end. Projects kept moving forward. I realized that so much of my busyness had been completely optional. But the biggest shift was internal. It was a mindset change. I had to redefine what success meant to me. It was no longer about a clean inbox or a packed calendar. Success became about a new skill learned, a complex problem understood, a creative idea brought to life. I started a learning journal. At the end of each day, instead of just reviewing my to-do list, I'd write down one new thing I truly understood. It could be a piece of customer feedback, a new software trick, or an insight from an article I read. This simple habit rewired my brain to seek out knowledge, not just tasks. This transition wasn't easy. I had to have some awkward conversations with my boss and colleagues. I had to explain why I wasn't responding to emails within 5 minutes anymore. I had to set boundaries. Some people didn't get it at first. They saw my cleared calendar and my slower response times and probably thought I was slacking off. But then the results started to speak for themselves. The quality of my work skyrocketed. I started bringing innovative ideas to the table, born from the hours I now spent in deep thought. I was no longer just managing the process. I was shaping the strategy. I became the person people came to for deep insights, not just for a status update. One of the most powerful tools I discovered on this journey was the idea of productive meditation. This is something I'd do on my commute, or while going for a walk. Instead of just listening to music or a podcast, I'd pick one specific professional problem and just think about it from all angles. No pressure to solve it, just the freedom to explore it. It's amazing what your brain can come up with when you give it the space to wander with purpose. Embracing deep learning has fundamentally changed my life, not just my career. I'm less stressed, more fulfilled, and ironically, I'm more successful by every traditional metric. I get more done, but it feels like I'm doing less. It's because the work I'm doing now has leverage. An hour of deep work can be more valuable than 20 hours of shallow, performative work. It has the difference between building a sand castle that washes away with the tide and laying the foundation for a skyscraper. So if you feel like you're stuck on that hamster wheel of busyness, I want you to know there's a way off. Start small. Pick one thing. Turn off your notifications for an hour. Block off 90 minutes for uninterrupted deep work on your most important task. Decline one unnecessary meeting. At the end of the day, ask yourself, what did I learn today? Not just, what did I do today? Let's stop glorifying being busy and start celebrating being thoughtful. Let's trade the short-lived satisfaction of a checked-off to-do list for the lasting fulfillment of genuine understanding. The world doesn't need more busy people. It needs more deep thinkers, more creative problem solvers, and more people who are truly engaged with their work. It's time to quit the performance and start the real learning. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, let me know in the comments. What one step you will take this week to move away from performative productivity. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more content on working and living more intentionally. See you next time.